I had these experiences where it seemed like I entered into an altered state. And during those experiences, it's like the mind just slows down and then just stops. It's almost like you dissolve into something bigger than yourself.
What is consciousness? How this 20-year guy can understand consciousness?
It determines your state of mind. It determines the thoughts you think, the feelings you feel. It determines all the choices you think you have that you don't really have. It's the one thing that makes your destiny what it is and not something else.
Talking from a psychology point of view, some religions also quote this. Is it awareness?
Beyond that, it's the fundamental reality behind everything. Guruji did an experiment on a petri dish, and in the petri dish was a mixed sample of both cancer cells and non-cancer cells. And the blessing was able to differentiate between the two. It was able to target the cancer cells and kill them off and give life and viability to the healthy cells with just one blessing. We have over 6,000 science experiments.
Are we trying to say that we are heading in a direction wherein consciousness will replace doctors?
Some of them have great experiences. They see light, they see divine, they have all these different experiences. We can't validate whether that's true or not. That's not something that science can testify to.
If God exists, then why is so much suffering in the world? Is it necessary the person has to be spiritual or religious or has certain conduct, lifestyle, nature, anything?
There are ways that you can transform your consciousness, but
what is consciousness? In a very simple language, for a layman, for a 22-year-old, are you sitting watching this podcast? What is consciousness? How this 20-year guy can understand consciousness?
So consciousness, from a religious perspective, the grace of God. It's God's grace in action, right? You could say it's what programs all of our lives in the same way like you have a computer program and everything runs and operates off that program. Another great example is to look at it as, for example, our biology is right. We're running off of a program, and that's called DNA, right? So DNA tells our bodies and even our health, right? It dictates all of those things. It's very difficult to change our DNA. It's like, can you change your hair color? You can do temporary or, effects on it. You can bleach it, you can dye it, but ultimately your hair color will be brown, and that's imbued in your DNA. Right. And so in the same way, you can say consciousness is the DNA of DNA.
Okay. Consciousness is the DNA of DNA. Okay.
Yes. Consciousness determines your DNA. It gives the destiny to a cell and an atom. It tells a cell, like a lot of people don't know this, but a lot of your cells, like science has no idea what tells a cell what kind of organ it'll become, right? What tells it, what location in the body it's going to go to. Science has no answers for that. And they say, all cells start off the same, but there's some mechanism, there's something out there that tells a cell what it's going to grow up and evolve and become, and whether it's going to be a sick cell or a healthy cell. The body just suddenly knows what to do. In the same way, how do atoms know how to form specific materials, very specific materials? What differentiates a tree from a rock? It's like there's some intelligence behind it that tells it what to do and what to become. And all of those creations, all of those programs have a specific set of characteristics and behaviors. When we get to non-living materials, for example, there's something called physical constants, where you have like the boiling point, the melting point, the firing point, right? All those things, they don't change with a given material unless you like add in an external energy or another substance to it to have some influence over that. But the material itself, boiling water, will always boil at a certain temperature. That won't change unless you add salt to it.
Right.
But you can't change it with your intention. You can't change it by staring at it longer, right? We wish we could, but it can't be done. Science has acknowledged this. Science says it's impossible to change this. And we've been able to change it. We've changed physical constants far beyond what science says is even possible. And all of this is done by changing the programming of the atom. When you change the inherent programming of the atom, the information within the atom itself, then the characters and behaviors of the material change as a result. And when consciousness raises in intensity, when it evolves the atom, when it evolves the material, that material ends up becoming more beneficial and more useful for humanity and for other purposes. It has multifaceted purposes. So like when consciousness raises in human life, right, from lower levels of consciousness, we have a bunch of, mental health problems, emotional problems, right? Mental restlessness, ADD, ADHD. We have, confusion, depression, sadness, anxiety. Sound familiar? There's a lot of suffering. And on top of that, you can also have really bad characters, right, that are expressions of lower levels of consciousness, like, selfishness, or people who betray other people, conspirators. You have people who, are very, only focused on themselves and their own lives, or who are willing to hurt other people, damage other people, right? Those kinds of people who are ungrateful, who don't care, right? Those are the qualities of lower levels of consciousness. And when consciousness evolves in that person, the characters and behaviors of that person change as well. Suddenly they enter states of mental calmness, kind of like that state of stillness, right? You suddenly, from high levels of consciousness, you even have command over your mind, where you can stop your own thoughts. And then there's this natural state of higher, you don't have to force it. It's not behavior based. You don't try and become calm. You don't try and manage your life. It is natural and inherent to higher levels of consciousness. So this peace, this happiness, this clarity, this vision, this enthusiasm, ambition, motivation, inspiration, you start developing these characters of love and empathy, gratitude. You care for other people. You're willing to sacrifice and do more. You have a greater sense of responsibility and your impact on the world and on other people's lives. So these are inherent qualities to higher levels of consciousness. So consciousness programs everything. It determines your state of mind. It determines the thoughts you think, the feelings you feel. It determines your relationships. It determines your career, your life purpose, what you think is possible, what you don't think is possible. It determines your belief system. It determines all the choices you think you have that you don't really have. It's that one thing that sets that apart. It's the one thing that makes your destiny what it is and not something else. So that is consciousness. It's the fundamental reality behind everything.
I mean, talking from a psychology point of view, or some religions also quote this, is it awareness? Consciousness is being very aware about your thoughts, about your conduct, or it is beyond that?
Beyond that. Consciousness can make you aware, but awareness does not determine consciousness. So you have no effect over your consciousness by simply having more awareness of it, right? Because we see consciousness as coming directly from God, right? So if consciousness, right, that's how God created the universe and controls it and interacts with the world. So you could say it's a divine energy almost. It's the grace of God. So if it's coming from God, how can whatever we have within our experience of life have an effect on what God has, right? God is the creator, right? Imbues and programs our existence. That consciousness determines our awareness. Right? A lot of people like to think that consciousness is a byproduct of the brain, or that if you're more aware, you can, to an extent in which if you are sincere and you're pure and innocent, you can evolve your consciousness, which can increase your awareness. But having awareness itself does not dictate having higher levels of consciousness. So things need to be altered at the level of consciousness first.
I would like to understand you as a person, right?
Okay.
How you came to this path. What's your story? How it all started?
What happened to me from a very young age, before I even had like the conscious context of religion or anything like that, like before I even had those big questions answered in my life, like what is God and all those things, I had these experiences where it seemed like I entered into an altered state. And during those experiences, it's like the mind just slows down and then just stops. It's almost like you dissolve into something bigger than yourself. And in that place of like complete stillness, it's like there's just this natural ecstatic bliss that just kind of
Mhm.
seemed to come out of nowhere.
Uh,
But it just seemed to like permeate my entire being. And from that, it was like an instant knowing within me, like this
mhm.
is God.
Okay.
And so
How
I
old were you
can't,
when you had these experiences?
it must have been like as early as maybe 4 or 5 years old.
Okay.
So, and I had them periodically. It wasn't like a continuous. So
Uh,
they came and went,
mhm.
but each time they were, something of that nature.
Mhm.
And every time it's just like I don't know what told me it was God. It was just this immediate knowing this
Mhm.
is God.
Okay.
And
Uh,
from that place, it's like everything that was wrong was right. All
uh,
problems, any type of, sadness or
mhm.
anything I was going through, it's just kind of like being in the presence of that divinity
Mhm.
made all the problems in my life just go away. It
Uh,
was like the thing that kind of I can't even put words to it
uh-huh.
because when you're in that state, there are no words to
Mhm.
properly describe it. That's what I
Okay.
like to say. It's like when you have those experiences, words don't do it justice.
Mhm.
But all I can say, it was this complete stillness. I felt like I was absorbed into something outside of
Mhm.
myself.
Mhm.
It was like even, yeah, for me, it was
Uh-huh.
just God.
So these experiences used to come and go. So
Yes.
periodically,
Yeah.
right? Okay. Why do you think, I mean, these experiences happened to you? Was it like God chose, or were there any family circumstances or any such environment you were in?
No, it didn't. I mean, as most as I can say is they happened when I was in a state of calmness.
Mhm.
I was just outside sitting in nature or just sitting in my living room, but there wasn't anything that caused them to happen. I can't
Mhm.
really say that there was a way I was being or the way my family was or the environment that made it start or made it happen. It
Mhm.
just kind of felt like it came to me out of nowhere.
Uh-huh.
That's as best as I can describe it. I
Uh-huh.
never knew when it was coming. I could kind of feel the lead up to it, but I
Uh-huh.
never knew what could cause it to happen. And that was my struggle my whole life is like, how can I make this happen again?
Uh-huh.
Because when you have that experience and then after a while it fades, the longing comes out, that
Mhm.
longing to have that experience
Mhm.
because it's so complete. It's
Mhm.
so perfect in so many ways that you life by comparison is so imperfect and
Uh-huh.
incomplete
Right.
that you want nothing more than to return to that perfection.
Mhm.
So like my whole life was just waiting for the next experience and
Mhm.
nothing I could do would make it happen. And I had
Mhm.
experience with a lot of things like yoga and meditation and all those
Mhm.
things. And nothing gave me that experience except maybe it was destiny. I can't
Mhm.
possibly say what it was, but
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Right. So, whenever any such experience happened, what kind of change you experienced? Was there any change every time this experience came to you, or you used to return back to the normal state?
No, I would say that my ability to perceive and understand life was a
Mhm.
little altered every time.
Mhm.
I felt like, uh, I don't know, it gave me more depth,
Mhm.
more clarity and understanding. And I felt like every time I went into that experience, like obviously there was this part of yourself that's always connected to it. I feel even though the
Mhm.
experience is gone, I feel like there's always a part of you that has changed
Uh-huh.
permanently from it.
Uh-huh.
And so those changes over time, it kind of directed the course of my life,
Mhm.
which led me to, wanting to sustain that state permanently.
Mhm.
And so I had no other understanding of how that could be done because religion didn't really talk about it in the way that
Mhm.
I would understand it as the
Mhm.
same.
Yeah.
And so for me, I had some experience with the gurus and everything. And
Uh-huh.
so I had this idea from a young age that,
Mhm.
okay, maybe there's a guru or somebody who lives in that state all the time,
Mhm.
who through that connection can help establish you in that state as
Mhm.
like a conduit or like a
Uh-huh.
jumper cable.
Uh-huh.
Right. And so I had that understanding that, they were like an extension of divine. And so you
Mhm.
could reach divine through them. They could
Uh-huh.
help you until eventually you had your own connection.
Uh-huh.
And so eventually, I think I was around maybe 8 years of age where I had another one of those experiences. And again, I was at recess, so I wasn't even calm. I was running around playing with
Okay.
other kids. I
Uh-huh.
remember I just ran somewhere and stood there for a moment. And then that experience, right, that feeling came over me again.
Uh-huh.
And then I felt, myself dissolving into that light. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, I just had this deep knowing, this immediate knowing,
Mhm.
right, that there was a man out there that I was
Mhm.
going to marry who would be this miraculous enlightened being on this planet who
Mhm.
would lead to my own enlightenment and my own awakening.
Mhm.
And that happened from the age of 8 before I even had a crush on boys or anything like that, right? This
Uh-huh.
knowing that I had a husband out there who divine picked out for me, right? That I was
Uh-huh.
destined to marry.
And
And
you were
so
8 years old
I
at
was
that
only
time.
8 years of age
Uh-huh.
when that happened. And
Uh-huh.
so I was the only thing that divine left out was like, when? So I had this whole uncertainty my whole life. I knew that this man was there. I knew that this man was going to come into my life. I didn't know when, because
Mhm.
this could have happened anytime. Maybe I would be dying and this man would come in like the last 5 minutes of
Mhm.
my life. And then I'd be like, finally, but I didn't want to wait that long. I'm like, I want to meet him now. And so this type of uncertainty, obviously, when you live with uncertainty, you
Mhm.
live with a lot of mental health problems
Right.
because
Uh-huh.
uncertainty it causes stress within your being.
Mhm.
It causes mental restlessness, ADD,
Mhm.
ADHD, anxiety. I had this deep loneliness and this longing
Mhm.
and this inability to really connect with my peers and other people my age. I didn't have a lot
Mhm.
of friends, and so it kind of led to a lot of other problems,
Mhm.
mental health and emotional problems,
Mhm.
huge depression and sadness,
Mhm.
and yeah, and then there was this sense that I needed to live my life in accordance with,
Mhm.
meeting this person.
Right.
I wanted God. I wanted enlightenment, even before I
Mhm.
knew what enlightenment was. For me, it was
Right.
just, I want God.
Right.
And so I led my life, trying to be perfect for God.
Like how? I mean,
How is like, I didn't know what to do. So based upon what religion and everything told me, it
mhm.
was like, don't do drugs, like don't smoke, don't drink. I tailored my whole life in a way that
Mhm.
I felt would make me deserving or worthy.
Okay.
And
Uh-huh.
so I didn't even have sex. I didn't
Uh-huh.
party or anything like that, right? I
Mhm.
didn't do anything that all the other kids and teenagers my age were
Mhm.
doing.
Right.
So I lived my life with God as my priority and I focused and I tried to keep even my mind, my thoughts, my heart, everything pure.
Mhm.
I tried to live according to these divine principles, which is,
Mhm.
to be loving, empathetic,
Mhm.
caring, sacrificing. So I tried to do all of that, emulate that kind of character and behavior in my
Mhm.
life in order to, basically reach a point where divine was like, okay, you're ready.
Uh,
You're ready now.
right.
So, and eventually, I guess I was ready.
So what I can understand is at a very young age, even when you were 8 years old, you had an idea, you had this thought very clear in yourself that
Yes.
there is going to be a person
Yes.
whom you will marry, right? And to be deserving, you conditioned your entire life accordingly,
Right.
right? When you were having such thoughts or experiences, did you share it with your family, your friends, and what were their reactions when you told this to them?
So I didn't really share it because for me, a majority of my life, I thought they were normal experiences that
Hmm.
everybody had.
Oh.
And for me, also, I learned from a very young age not to
Mhm.
talk about God with a lot of people. So I realized very early on that, especially my peers, a lot of them didn't believe in God. And a
Mhm.
lot of them didn't have the same kind of experiences and upbringing I did.
Mhm.
And so for me, I didn't feel, and I didn't have a lot of people around me that I could talk to about
Mhm.
it. And even my mother,
Mhm.
nurtured me from an early age. She was like, be careful who you talk to
Uh,
and be careful because a lot of people might not understand,
uh,
we're a lot more spiritually open as a
uh,
family and a lot of people have very, specific blinders or beliefs
uh,
and they can
right.
flip at any time.
Mhm.
So I didn't share it with a lot of people. I think my mother knew to a certain extent,
Uh,
but at the same time, when you have these experiences that, like I said, there aren't really words to talk about them. It's
mhm.
not really possible. So I didn't know how to even begin describing them. And a lot of them, like until I started going through those experiences after meeting my husband, who's my guru, right? Until I had those experiences come back to me frequently until I became enlightened myself, like I didn't understand how extraordinary they were until they started happening again. And I was like, oh, this is what that was.
Okay.
So I don't know.
So
It's kind of
how
like
did this happen? I mean, there was a huge uncertainty. Would it
Yeah.
be at the age of 90 or at the age of 19? You had no idea when you will meet
Yeah.
the person. So how that uncertainty turned into, say, certainty, or how you met your guru? How exactly? I mean, from that mental state when you are stressed or you don't know,
Right.
you're living in that condition of uncertainty. How it unfolded?
Right. So my mother, like I said, opened very spiritually. So
Uh-huh.
we dabbled in everything.
Uh-huh.
So I joke that she's a hippie without the drugs. So she was open to all kinds of, different modalities, healing. We went to many different gurus. We went to many different healers, clairvoyants, psychics, like you name it, we probably tried it. And she was seeing this kind of growing loneliness and sadness and this inability to connect, right? She was very aware of that. And so I think a lot of the reason why she took me to meet all these people was to help me resolve whatever was going on within me, because she didn't know.
Sorry, what was her reason for exploring so much in terms of spirituality or gurus?
Well, she was brought up Christian, but she had a spiritual experience almost like what I had. A little different though, where she experienced a miraculous healing. And so because of that, and she knew it was God, and it was outside of the context of Christianity, but it didn't conflict it at the same time. So she started, looking for answers and I guess trying different things out. And so that's what led her to being so open. So she just understood that all of them touch upon the same truth. So she took me everywhere. And what happened is that I had like maybe short periods of reprieve at best. So just like maybe a few days where I could maybe say it was psychological or placebo or whatnot, but I felt good for a few days. Maybe, I felt a little calmer or more peace, or like, okay, maybe these things are good now. And then it would always come back, though. I'd come back to that baseline of sadness and loneliness and anxiety again. It would always come back, that nothing got rid of it entirely. And in other scenarios, I felt nothing at all. I was just like, I don't know what happened. I trust that something happened, right? Because that's what a lot of spiritual people feel, is that I trust something happened, even though they feel no outcome. So it's an unfortunate side of spirituality. The spirituality is like, wait till your death, then you get the benefit. So it's kind of like, if I wait, it'll manifest somehow in my life. But nothing really happened. And so because of this openness, right, and she had other experiences with other gurus, she had also like a friend circle, who were into similar things that she was into. And she went to an event, and at that event, they were talking about this man named Guruji, Guruji Mahendra Trivedi. And they were talking about, his incredible scientific research that he was conducting to prove the efficacy, the power of his blessings, and as well as validate the existence of God and consciousness as a scientific reality. And so, she was amazed. She had never heard of somebody doing this before. And she had heard so many, because at that time, and to this day, it's only grown, so many incredible testimonials. I mean, that alone was persuasive enough, the kind of miracles people were reporting that they had. So she was like, okay, I'll go meet this guru and I'll get a blessing myself. And she was going through her own problems with relationships with, the family and everything, and nothing solved it. Right? She tried everything. Like I said, nothing fixed it. So she got a blessing, and literally within 24 hours, those relationships that she prayed for to improve completely changed overnight. And she had a bunch of health problems that she was suffering with could just completely resolve. And so she's like, she never experienced that with anything. Nothing was able to fix those problems, especially to that complete resolution. And so she's like, okay, this is real. Whatever's happening, he's the real McCoy, the real deal. So let me take my daughter to meet him. And she offered it as a gift for my birthday. She was like, we can, get a cake or a present or a birthday party, or You want a blessing
Right.
from a guru?
Uh,
And I immediately said yes. Like, forget the cake and everything. Just give me the blessing. I'm ready for it. I
Right.
just knew immediately I wanted it. I was so amazed with her experience that I wanted to try it myself.
And how old were you at this time?
20.
20.
This is
Okay.
in January 2011.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And my birthday was January 30th, 2011. So
Uh-huh.
on the way to meeting him, right, she was describing him, kind of preparing me to meet him. Because my experience with the gurus is like the aesthetics who are like monks who wear
Yeah.
the saffron robes
Right.
and all those things. And she's like, he's very different from that. So just, I'm preparing you. He's, he cut off all his hair. He wears a suit and tie. He's all about science and practical thinking and outcome. So he's not going to talk about all that spiritual language that you're used to hearing. And then on top of that, she was just going into all of the science. And I remember when she went into detail about it and I was hearing it for the first time, I was amazed and touched and a little bit shocked as well, because there's something really exotic about an Indian guru from the East coming to America, where they can easily get a massive audience of followers, just like that. They just wear the right outfit and speak the right language and know any little bit of information. They're a good orator and they'd have a mass following. And there are many examples to prove that. So he could have easily been successful there. And at the same time, as I learned later, he already had an established follower base in India. He had a huge number of people who already revered him. He had wealth. He had status. He had senators, politicians, like businessmen, entrepreneurs. He had actresses and actors from Bollywood, distributors, producers, high-level people that already revered him and saw him as their guru, who gave him everything. And he left that. He literally left that lifestyle, left those people, came to America, chopped off all his hair, put on the suit and tie, and you have no idea how difficult it is to be taken as a guru. But the moment you cut off your hair and wear a suit, it's kind of insane how many people don't see you as a guru anymore the moment you do that. It's like just a change in outfit and you're not a guru anymore. And on top of that, the kind of skeptics scientifically that I knew he would face with the masses, the people, if he's doing things that are completely unconventional and against what we see as science today, he's doing things that are considered impossible and proving things that shouldn't be possible through a divine blessing. Right. So to be taken seriously, for scientists to want to work with him, for science to accept what they're seeing as true and fact, instead of, saying, I can't accept it. I can't deny the data, but I can't accept it either. Right. That's a hard path. He's going against norms and establishments that have been there for decades. He's fighting an uphill battle constantly. So for me, that spoke greatly of his integrity and who he is as a human being. So I was... And I was amazed because I had never heard of someone proving that kind of reality, that God existed scientifically. Because I knew God existed, but like my own experience, I was never taken seriously about it. I couldn't talk to anybody about it. And he was here saying this is real. So for me, I was just like, finally. So in that car ride, as she was describing more and more about him, I was just like so deeply touched. And at the same time, I always get emotional talking about his journey and my journey meeting him. But what ended up happening is she was describing him to me and, his appearance and all that. And I was just kind of, joking to myself. I was like, wouldn't it be funny if I was going to meet this person and I want his blessing to bring that person into my life that I had from a vision of 8 years of age, right? And it turned out he was that same person. But I was going to him for a blessing to bring that person into my life. So I was thinking, wouldn't that be funny if that was actually him? But it was like, sometimes you have thoughts and you think they're fantasy and they turn out to be real. It was like one of those moments where I thought it was fantasy. It was just, a delusion. And then I went to him, I got my blessing, and I very quickly knew that he was that man. I knew it almost immediately.
Weren't you curious? So, like, how is this working? I took a blessing and next day everything has changed. I mean, what kind of curiosity, questions or doubts, or what was going in your mind when you were experiencing sudden paradigm shift in your life?
I mean, I led my whole life like meeting these kind of people and doing these kinds of things and having
Mhm.
these healings and getting, very minimal tangible benefits.
Mhm.
So to have that happen so dramatically, it was like it's about time. That's kind of what
Mhm.
it felt like more than anything. It was
Wow.
a little shock and awe, but more than anything, because I 100% believed it was real, because my
Mhm.
faith was strong, my
Mhm.
intuition was strong. I knew God was real. I knew God was capable of these things.
Right.
So it was a mixture of relief and a sense of finally and awe that this
Uh-huh.
happened like out
Uh,
of nowhere, that
right.
nothing like kind of led up to it. There's no preparation for it. It
Mhm.
was just kind of like suddenly there's this guru and
Right.
he blessed me and I transformed my whole life.
Mhm.
So maybe his
Right.
blessing led me to
Yes.
marrying him. Who knows?
Mm. Because you asked for that blessing, right? You
Yeah,
bless me
maybe
so that I
that's
get
what
that man.
made it. I asked for that, and then he was like, "Oh, I changed my destiny too. Now I'm stuck with you." No.
You also mentioned about his uphill battle, that instead of, in India, he had that following, he had wealth, status, everything. And
Yeah.
he decided to go to States, cut his hair, wear a
Yes.
suit. What was his reason behind doing this? What was his trigger, or what was his reason of bringing this shift in his life?
Right. So a lot of what happened with him is he witnessed a lot of people who would go to these types of spiritual leaders
Mhm.
or transformational leaders or whoever it may be,
Mhm.
and they'd give their lives over to these people,
Mhm.
right? And a lot of them were not real teachers, false teachers, or
Mhm.
teachers who abuse or manipulate or take your money and don't do
Mhm.
anything for you, just kind of create this status and this psychological belief.
Mhm.
And he said that from a very young age, right? He heard this story about Krishna where it's essentially like, the worst thing that you can do, that, he's Krishna was talking to somebody who was asking, what can you forgive? And he gave a list of all the things he can forgive. But he said, the one thing that I can't forgive is if you give someone like a sincere seeker false hope.
Mhm.
He says, it's the
Mhm.
one thing I can never forgive.
Mhm.
And so that was something that was just inherent to him. He was like, am I giving them false hope? Am I one of these teachers? He's like, they're getting benefits and I see the outcome,
Mhm.
right? They're reporting to me huge benefits, but I
Mhm.
just need to know, what are the limits? What are the capabilities of this blessing? Why
Mhm.
is it limited to only people? Right? Why
Mhm.
have all these people who are doing these blessings or teaching these rituals and dogmas or whatever it may be, why have they not tried to establish this scientifically? And why have they not tried to extend it to things beyond those with psychological influence, like
Mhm.
beyond people?
Right.
Why have they not tried? I mean, if it's God doing the miracle, then why is God only capable of transforming humans? God
Mhm.
can surely do more than that. God
Mhm.
is the creator. God created everything. God can change everything.
Mhm.
So God can change non-living materials. God can change bacteria and viruses. God can change all of that. So I think part of it was he says he's actually one of the greatest skeptics there is, which is
Mhm.
ironic. You probably don't expect someone who's enlightened to say that, but I think it's more of a testament to his ethics, his morality, and his integrity than it is
Mhm.
skepticism about the nature of God. It was more like he wanted to be a leader with integrity. And he also understood the importance and significance of
Mhm.
establishing this scientifically. He knew that this is something that is the only thing that can
Mhm.
solve all of the most prevalent problems we see today,
Mhm.
where science, technology, and modern medicine have reached their limits in being able to address.
Mhm.
And the only way, right, we see a lot of people running away and falling away from religion
Mhm.
and spirituality, even if they haven't really given up on God yet,
Mhm.
right? They're showing signs where they're giving up on a lot of those avenues, those
Mhm.
pathways to God. And so he says the only way that religion and spirituality will prove useful again to humanity, where humanity will depend on it in the same way they depend on science and technology,
Mhm.
is when spirituality and religion can offer more than what science can deliver.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so he saw the outcome of the blessings and he thought this needs to be an objective, empirical, scientific reality for all
Mhm.
those reasons. For the integrity of religion and spirituality, to
Mhm.
restore people's faith in God, to establish a fact based God, not a faith based God. Because God, if God's real, God is fact-based. God
Mhm.
can be demonstrated in a lab using all the scientific protocols that we use for all natural phenomena. And so, that was his whole journey leading up to it. So for me, it's an indication of a man full of honesty, authenticity, and integrity. That's what I see. That was his pull and his motivation. He wasn't interested in the facade of the
Mhm.
guru. He was interested in the real thing.
Talk about this subject, God. I mean, series of questions comes in everyone's mind,
Yeah.
right? But you mentioned that can be proved in laboratory with facts,
Yes.
right? How?
So when we get into establishing God,
Mhm.
so we have to see, how are we going to measure God?
Mhm.
What religion is missing about the nature of God, because religion believes God exists, right?
Mhm.
And the origin of the universe, if we're saying there is a creator and we're reading all of these religious texts and knowing that, okay, all of them point to that nothing existed before and then suddenly everything existed,
Mhm.
right? There were no prior materials, energy, matter, all these things. There are different scientific theories about that, but the religious theories are that God created those things. God created these materials.
Mhm.
And then you have some parts of science that accept that maybe consciousness is fundamental,
Mhm.
right? Max Planck, quantum physicist, he spent decades of his life, researching quantum physics, and he came to the conclusion himself, though he was not able to properly validate it in his lifetime, he came to the conclusion himself that consciousness is fundamental and matter is derivative of consciousness. So consciousness came first.
Mhm.
And everything else in all these different variations and forms are simply expressions of that consciousness. So what is missing in religion is how God interacts with the world. God interacts with the world through consciousness. So that's what's missing in religion. God
Okay.
is established in religion, but not how God works, right? Not how we connect with God. That kind of interaction is a little ambiguous. And then when we get into science, science is establishing consciousness as a byproduct of the brain, sometimes as, before the brain, but it has not established its relationship to God yet. And
Right.
so that's what we've done scientifically, is we've been able to establish the relationship between all three, between God, consciousness, and matter, and how they all work together, how they all integrate and work as one system.
God, consciousness, and matter.
Yeah,
Okay.
the link, that's the missing link,
Mhm.
right, between
Okay.
God and matter is consciousness. And so to establish the existence of God, what we're doing is we are evolving things at the level of consciousness through divine blessings.
Mhm.
And so these divine blessings, they raise consciousness or increase the intensity. You can use other words synonymously with consciousness, like the grace of God, the soul, the spirit, all of those things, like empowering the soul or more of the grace of God in your life. For me, they're all the same thing. We reference them the same, but we can say more consciousness. And so when there's no scientific tool that can measure consciousness directly. But when you raise and evolve consciousness, you can measure its effects. You can measure the impact of that. There are certain things consciousness should be able to do if it's fundamental, right? Certain things that it can change on like a programming level. If consciousness programs reality and gives everything its structure, its form, its characters and behaviors, then changing consciousness should change all of those things, right? We're doing it the other way around. Science has it wrong. Science is trying to change structures and trying to deal with things chemically and materially in order to have an influence over the real program or consciousness. So they're just missing that piece of vital information, which is why we have all of these problems, because all of these problems persist and are created from lower levels of consciousness. You raise the consciousness, these problems that we all see today, problems with our agriculture, our mental health, our technology, our science, our medicine, all of these things are worldwide pandemic level crises that science has been able to improperly address, are all solved by simply doing one thing, and that is raising the consciousness involved.
And if someone wants to move towards higher level of consciousness, is it something that can be generated, or is it something which is harnessed, or it's like downloaded? How does it work?
So I mean, the fastest and quickest way from even my own experience, but also what our scientific studies say, right? We have over 6,000 science experiments, over 670 peer-reviewed
6,000
publications.
science experiments.
6,000 science experiments. And it's not just one of them had a good result or maybe 10 of them, and we're only talking about those 10. I'm saying every single one of them, not a single experiment has failed or proven less than unprecedented outcomes. I'm saying every single one of the 6,000 experiments has shown something miraculous that consciousness is capable of through these divine blessings. That's how we raise consciousness, is by the application of divine blessings. And so you could say that is probably the fastest, most effective way of increasing consciousness very quickly. That's what we found to be very effective. And I found even from my own experience and the testimonials of over, we've actually blessed over 300,000 people, but we have a huge reservoir of testimonials from our website as well. But there are ways that you can transform your consciousness without the help of the divine blessings, but it's a lot slower, it's a lot more tedious, and also given this day and age in the world we live in, it's a lot more confusing.
Like what kind of ways, which are slower ways?
So there's only really one way that you can do it. And that is by having innocence and purity.
By having?
Innocence and purity, by becoming innocent and pure.
Okay.
If you can somehow restore your innocence and purity as a human being, your purity, your pure understanding of life, like that experience or that state of mind you have when you're a child, everything's new and fresh and everything's, full of wonder and awe. And it's like there's a level of trust in life and trust in your parents in the same way you have that trust in the divine. Your parents are divine when you were a child because you have that kind of faith and trust in their presence in your lives. In the same way, we must establish that level of purity, that level of trust and faith in the divine. And so that is a faster way, right, to evolve your consciousness. But at the same time, it's difficult for many people to restore that natural blueprint that we all have. And at the same time, it's a lot more difficult and slower by comparison to when you have these blessings, as well as following that path. The blessings do something that almost expedite, or they speed up your evolution. And there are a lot of gurus and spiritual leaders who have talked about how the guru can help speed up your evolution, your progression towards enlightenment. There are a lot of theories about that, and we've been able to see this scientifically and empirically, that yes, the guru, because they are connected to God, there's something about that connection and being, within that presence or being connected to them somehow, even just energetically, where they can help speed up your own evolution as well. And so it's a very effective way for you to even restore your purity and innocence. But that's the best way. And then following the divine principles and fundamentals. So whether you believe in them or not, right? That there is something called, the Dharma, right? The absolute, where there are certain set of divine principles and fundamentals that you must conduct yourself and express. You must have an expression of these characters, or you must fulfill your responsibilities and adopt this kind of nature within your life, and that helps speed up your evolution and growth. Well, we like to call it following the divine principles and fundamentals, meaning God, in the same way where I conducted my life, in a way that I wanted to feel worthy enough to meet this man, to become enlightened, I led my life in a very specific way. I felt I needed to stay with the best morality, the best ethics. I knew I needed to think less selfishly. And I felt in my life, everybody, I'm sure at one point in time feels like I'm very selfish. So I'm like, I know I have these characters, from a young age where it's like, I need to start thinking of other people. I need to develop these characters. They're not inherent yet, but I need to develop them. So sometimes just following and disciplining your life with those divine principles and fundamentals, right? You curate those characters because God blesses you in a way by following those divine principles and helps evolve your consciousness so that you actually embody them, you express them naturally. And so, but it's faster with a guru, with a blessing. That's for sure, from my own experience.